Silence. Not a red flag, not a green light, not a gentle nudge in her spirit, just the thick, disorienting fog of silence. And honestly, I've been there too. It's one thing to wait on God when you're in motion, when you feel guided, when you're seeing growth, even if the relationship hasn't come yet. But it's another thing entirely when you're still, and the stillness feels like divine abandonment, when your spirit is exhausted, when you've done everything right, and yet the heavens feel sealed, when every wedding invitation in your inbox starts to feel like a spiritual taunt, when even your prayers feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling. That's the kind of waiting that wears on your soul. And it doesn't help that the people around you often mean well, but say all the wrong things. God's timing is perfect. Maybe you're not ready. Your Boaz is just around the corner. You nod, you smile, but inside you're thinking, how long is this corner? How much more ready do I have to be? Because what you're really asking is deeper than that. It's not just, when will I meet someone? It's, why does God feel so silent about the thing I care about most? And if you're anything like the hundreds of people I've coached, ministered to, or simply walked alongside, you've probably wrestled with this in the quiet corners of your heart, too. Let me say this before we go any further. You're not weak for feeling frustrated. You're not faithless for being confused. You're not less spiritual because you've questioned God in the stillness. That frustration you feel, that ache, that longing that sometimes turns into tears when no one's watching, that's not evidence of a lack of faith. It's evidence of how deeply you desire something meaningful. And that's not a flaw. It's a sign of your humanity. But the frustration has to be held wisely, because if you're not careful, that silence will turn into suspicion. Suspicion toward God. Suspicion toward yourself. You start asking, what's wrong with me? Did I disqualify myself? Is this even something I'm supposed to want? You start shrinking your desire, not because it's unholy, but because it's unfulfilled. You stop dreaming. You stop asking. You convince yourself you're content, but it's not contentment, it's resignation. I've seen it. I've lived it. I've sat across from beautiful, called, gifted people who have stopped praying bold prayers because they're afraid of being disappointed again, and the silence, which once just felt confusing, now feels wounding. So let's talk about what's happening when God feels silent about your love life. Let's go deeper than the surface advice. Let's talk about the kind of silence that stretches your faith, that strips away your formulas, that presses you into the question, who is God to me when He doesn't give me what I want, when I want it? Here's the first thing I'll say, and it might be uncomfortable. God's silence is not always a sign that nothing is happening. Sometimes it's a sign that something deep is being formed in you, that you're being prepared not just to meet someone, but to handle what love demands. Because let's be real love is beautiful, but it's not easy. It will press on your insecurities. It will stretch your capacity. It will call out every unhealed place in you that hiding could never reach. And a good God doesn't just want to give you a spouse. He wants to prepare you for the covenant. And covenant requires wholeness, not performance. So, what if the silence is an invitation to pause and examine not just what you want, but who you are becoming while you wait? And please hear me. I'm not saying God makes you wait to punish you. I don't believe in a God who dangles love in front of your face like a carrot on a stick. But I do believe in a God who works with long timelines because he's more interested in eternal fruit than temporary feelings. That's hard to hear when you're tired, I know. Especially if you've done all the work. You've fasted, you've forgiven, you've set boundaries, you've said no when you wanted to say yes. You've held your standard when everyone told you to lower it. And still, silence. Let me say something you might need to hear. Silence is not rejection. Silence is not punishment. Silence is not always even silence. Sometimes it's just a redirection of how God speaks. Maybe he's no longer speaking through circumstances because he wants to speak through Scripture. Maybe he's no longer affirming your path through feelings because he wants to root you in truth. Maybe what feels like silence is actually a divine slowing, so that you don't rush into something your soul isn't ready for yet. But I get it. Trusting that is exhausting when you've waited for years. When you've had near misses, when you've been ghosted by people who said they were God-sent, when you've battled loneliness that you can't quite explain. So here's what I want you to do. Not fix, not figure out, not manipulate. Just this. Be honest with God about the frustration, not the cleaned-up version, not the religiously polite version, the real version. Tell him you're tired. Tell him you're confused. Tell him you're trying to trust, but your hope feels thin. He can handle it. He's not offended by your vulnerability. He's moved by it. The Psalms are full of raw, frustrated prayers, and God called David a man after his own heart because of that honesty. You don't have to pretend to be okay. You just have to choose not to walk away. And as you keep showing up to God day after day, week after week, you might notice something unexpected. Your definition of waiting begins to change. Waiting stops being about passivity. It becomes about preparation. You start asking different questions, not when will they come, but who am I becoming in the meantime? Not where's my confirmation, but where's my obedience? You stop performing for God and start partnering with Him. You stop asking for shortcuts and start asking for wisdom. You stop looking at other people's timelines as templates, and you start trusting that your journey is not late, it's customized. And slowly, quietly, you realize that the silence was never about abandonment. It was about alignment. You were never alone. You were just being refined. So if you're there right now, stuck between faith and frustration, I want to say this with all the compassion and conviction I have. You're not forgotten. You're not broken. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. And I know that doesn't take away the sting of the wait, but maybe it gives you something stronger than timelines. Perspective. You don't have to get over the frustration, but you can go through it, with God, with honesty, with hope that doesn't just wait, but builds while it waits. So stay rooted, stay tender, and stay open, because the silence isn't forever, and even now it might be speaking more than you think. If this message spoke to you, do me a favor. Drop a comment. I'm choosing to wait with purpose. Share this with a friend who needs to be reminded. Subscribe for more real talk about love, faith, and becoming the best version of you. Because here on this channel, we don't just wait, we grow while waiting. See you next time.